Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening up the files on a pretty significant event in football.
Yeah, we've got a load of source material, stats, analysis, all focused on one massive game.
The 2025 UEFA Champions League final.
PSG versus Inter Milan. A final, yeah, but one with a result that, well, it really makes you look twice.
Absolutely, 5-0.
Yeah.
So we're diving deep into the numbers and the analysis provided from that night at the Allianz Arena. Our mission, really, is to sift through this data, pull out the key insights, and help you understand how that scoreline happened, get you properly informed without, drowning in spreadsheets.
Exactly. It was Saturday, May 31st, 2025. The Allianz Arena, beautiful stadium, capacity, just over 75,000?
Yeah, sounds right. Set for a classic final, you'd think. Two huge clubs.
You expect tension, maybe a single goal deciding it, the culmination of a whole season.
And instead, well, the final whistle goes. And it's Paris Saint-Germain 5, Inter Milan 0.
5-0. In the Champions League final. I mean, that scoreline just screams story, doesn't it? You immediately think, how? How did that gulf appear between two top-tier teams?
That's the question. And the data we have here, the source material, that's our key to unlocking the how.
It is. You can't just look at 5-0 and guess. You need to see the underlying performance.
Okay, so let's start digging into that with the headline stats.
Yeah.
Because 5-0 is the result, but the numbers tell the 90-minute story. Possession first.
Yeah. PSG had 59%, Inter 41%.
So a decent majority for PSG, but maybe not, 5-goal dominance territory just based on that.
Not on its own, no. That's where expected goals XG becomes so important. It measures the quality of chances, right?
Right. How likely a shot is to go in based on where it's taken from, the situation.
Exactly. And here, PSG's XG was a massive 3.23.
Wow, 3.23. And Inter's?
Inter's was just 0.49.
Okay, hold on. So based on the quality of chances created, PSG were expected to score over 3 goals, and Inter, less than half a goal.
Precisely. That paints a very different picture already, doesn't it? It wasn't just luck.
And the raw shot numbers back this up.
Absolutely. Total shots, PSG 23, Inter just 8.
23-8.
And even more telling, look at shots on target. PSG hit the target 8 times. Inter, only 2.
8 shots on target versus 2. So PSG weren't just shooting from anywhere. They were consistently getting shots on goal from good positions.
Exactly. The data right from the start tells us this wasn't some fluke result with 5 wonder strikes. PSG created quality opportunities, repeatedly. Inter, well, they barely laid a glove on them in an attacking sense.
The difference in offensive threat seems huge just from those top-line numbers.
It really does. It shows PSG were penetrating, getting into those dangerous areas, while Inter just couldn't.
So let's go deeper then. This is where it gets really interesting, looking at the types of chances, big chances created. Now, these are the gilt-edged ones, right?
Yeah.
One-on-ones, clear-sighted goal.
Yeah, situations where you would back the attacker to score more often than not. And PSG created, wait for it, 8 big chances in this final.
8. Against Inter's defense in a Champions League final. That's incredible.
It is. And Inter, they created just 1.
1 big chance the entire game.
That stat alone almost tells the story of the match, doesn't it? 8 clear-cut opportunities versus 1. Even missing half of theirs, PSG are scoring 4 from those chances alone.
It highlights just how difficult Inter found it to break PSG down or create anything really threatening. Where were PSG getting these chances? Inside the box.
Overwhelmingly, 20 shots from inside the box for PSG. Inter had only 6.
20 versus 6 inside the area. They were practically living in Inter's penalty box.
And their creativity shines through, too.
Yeah.
Key passes those passes, leading directly to a shot. PSG made 19. Inter, just 6.
19 key passes. That's a lot of creative work happening.
And the quality of those final passes is reflected in expected assists, XA. Similarly to XG, but for the pass itself, PSG's XA was 2.13.
Okay, so the passes themselves were setting up high-quality scoring opportunities.
Right. Inter's XA, 0.35. Again, a massive difference. It shows PSG's final ball was consistently effective.
Even crossing.
Yeah, that's interesting, too. PSG weren't just hoofing it in. They completed 6 out of 9 crosses. That's 67%. Very efficient. Inter tried more crosses, 19 of them, but only completed 3. That's just 16%.
So high volume of chances, high-quality chances, the XG-XA, big chances, confirm that constantly getting into the box. It's a picture of, well, relentless attacking pressure from PSG.
Absolutely. But it raises the question, how were they managing to get the ball into those dangerous areas so often? How did they progress it up the pitch so effectively?
Yeah, how do they keep Inter pinned back like that? Let's look at the passing numbers.
Okay, total passes. PSG completed 464 out of 529 attempts. Inter completed 287 out of 352.
So PSG had more of the ball, and they were more accurate with it, too.
Yeah, higher volume, better completion rate, but crucially, where were they passing?
Good point. Passes in the opposition half.
PSG made 316 passes in Inter's half. Inter managed only 158 in PSG's half.
Wow, double the amount. So PSG were really camped out in Inter territory.
They were. And the killer stat for breaking lines is passes into the final third. PSG completed 108 passes into that attacking third.
108. And Inter?
Just 42.
Less than half. Okay, so that explains a lot. PSG weren't just keeping the ball. They were consistently finding ways through Inter's midfield and defense to get near the goal.
Exactly. They broke Inter's lines time and time again. Inter, on the other hand, really struggled to even get the ball forward with any control into those dangerous zones. That's why they couldn't generate the chances we talked about.
Now, if we flip this around, looking at Inter stats often reflects PSG's dominance, right? Like clearances.
Yeah, that's a classic indicator. Inter made 22 clearances. PSG only needed to make 7.
22 clearances suggests Inter were just under the cosh, constantly hoofing it clear.
Pretty much. It implies they couldn't play out, couldn't retain possession under PSG's pressure, and were often just trying to relieve the immediate danger rather than building attacks.
They also committed more fouls. 13 for Inter, 7 for PSG.
And more yellow cards, too, 3 versus 2.
Which could suggest, what? Frustration. Being pulled out of position.
Possibly both. It might indicate they were struggling to cope legally with PSG's movement, their speed, maybe resorting to fouls to stop attacks.
Inter also lost the ball more often 110 times compared to PSG's 89.
Yeah, and they were caught offside 5 times, while PSG weren't caught offside at all.
5 offsides. Perhaps trying riskier through balls or long balls that weren't coming off. Try and bypass that PSG midfield, maybe?
That's a plausible interpretation, yeah. A symptom of struggling to build play patiently, trying a more direct route that PSG's defense read well.
Even the goalkeepers.
Yeah.
Sommer for Inter made 3 saves. Donnarumma for PSG made 2. PSG had way more shots on target, but fewer saves recorded for Sommer.
Well, remember, PSG had 8 shots on target. Sommer saving 3 means 5 went in. Donnarumma saving 2 means Inter scored 0 from their 2 shots on target. It just reinforces the finishing quality, but maybe Sommer was kept busy dealing with shots around the goal too, or perhaps the big chances were just unsavable. Hard to say definitively from just the save count.
Okay, this next bit is interesting, though, looking at the physical side, the duels. Because despite the score, Inter actually won more duels overall. 38 to PSG's 33.
Yeah, that stood out to me too. And it wasn't just overall. They won slightly more aerial duels, 11-9, and slightly more ground duels too, 27-24.
And more interceptions. 8 for Inter, only 4 for PSG.
Right. So on the face of it, Inter were competing physically, winning individual battles, reading passes sometimes.
So how does that square with a 5-0 defeat? If they're winning duels and intercepting the ball, how are they conceding 5 and creating nothing?
Well, this is where context is everything. It suggests that while Inter players might have been winning individual contests, perhaps in midfield, or maybe making tackles after PSG had already advanced into dangerous positions.
So they weren't winning the key battles that stopped PSG getting into those positions in the first place.
That's how I'd interpret it based on all the other data. Winning a tackle after Dembélé has already skipped past 2 players into the final third is good, but it doesn't stop the initial penetration. They might have been winning duels, but not effectively disrupting PSG's overall attacking structure or preventing them from generating those high-quality chances. The interceptions, while higher, weren't enough to stem the tide or launch effective counters.
Okay, that makes sense. The individual effort was there, perhaps, but the collective defensive structure wasn't stopping PSG's flow.
Precisely. PSG found ways through despite those individual duel wins for Inter.
The source material also gives us the lineups and mentions the coaches, Luis Enrique for PSG, Simone Inzaghi for Inter. It specifically notes the lineups were key and aimed at victory.
Yeah, and it lists the starting teams. For PSG, it was Donnarumma in goal, then Mendes, Pacho, Marquinhos, Hakimi across the back.
Okay.
Midfield 3 of Ruiz, Vitinha, and Neves. And then up top, Kvaratskhelia, Dembélé, and Doué.
Right, and for Inter.
Sommer in goal. A back 3, Bastoni, Acerbi, Pavard. Then wingbacks DeMarco and Dumfries.
Standard intershake, yeah.
Midfield 3, Mkhitaryan, Calhanoglu, Barella. And the front 2, Lautaro Martinez and Marcus Thuram.
Strong lineups from both sides, as you'd expect. The source also lists the subs, notes Valentin Carboni was missing for Inter, and mentions both coaches made tactical adjustments.
Yeah, so it wasn't like one team fielded a significantly weaker side. These were prime squads. The data strongly suggests that whatever tactical plan Luis Enrique set up and whatever adjustments he made worked far, far better on the night than Simone Inzaghi's. The performance metrics just bear that out completely.
So let's bring it all together. Synthesizing all this data,
Yeah.
how does it really definitively explain that 5-0 PSG win?
Well, if you lay it all out, the picture is crystal clear, isn't it? PSG weren't just marginally better. They were statistically dominant across almost every single meaningful attacking metric.
The huge XG difference, 3.23 versus 0.49.
The massive shot advantage, total and on target.
The incredible gap in big chances created, 8 versus 1.
Constantly getting into the box, 20 shots from inside.
Dominating entry into the final third, over 100 passes in there.
It all points to one thing: relentless, high-quality attacking pressure. They were just constantly creating situations where goals were likely to happen.
And Inter just had no answer.
None at all, based on this data. Their struggle to move the ball forward, evidenced by the low passes into the final third, their high clearance count showing they were under siege, their inability to generate any significant threat, the low XG, few shots, only one big chance. It meant PSG faced almost no offensive pressure themselves.
So even if Inter won a few more tackles here and there,
It didn't matter in the grand scheme because they couldn't stop the overall flow that led to PSG carving out chance after chance after chance. The 5-0 scoreline, when you look at these underlying numbers provided, feels like a direct, almost inevitable consequence of that performance gap on the day.
it really does make sense when you see it laid out like that.
Yeah.
So why should you, listening to this, care about this deep dive into stats?
Because look, it takes a headline score that seems almost unbelievable, 5-0 in a Champions League final, and it makes it understandable. It shows you the how and the why.
It demonstrates that these performance metrics, things like XG, big chances, passes into the final third, they aren't just abstract numbers. They genuinely reflect what's happening on the pitch and strongly correlate with results.
Exactly. It moves the conversation beyond just saying, oh, PSG were brilliant or Inter collapsed. It shows you how brilliant PSG were offensively and how comprehensively Inter failed to cope or respond, according to this analysis.
It gives you a framework, maybe, for looking at stats from other games and seeing the narrative they tell beyond just the score.
It helps you understand the process behind the outcome.
So this deep dive, using the analysis and stats provided, has hopefully shed light on how that remarkable 5-0 win for PSG in the 2025 Champions League final came about through sheer statistical dominance over Inter Milan.
Yeah, fascinating stuff to unpack. Thanks for joining us for this exploration.
And maybe one final thought for you to mull over, based purely on this data we've discussed. Given the scale of statistical dominance needed for a 5-0 in a final like this, what single factor from this data set strikes you as the absolute most critical? Was it PSG's sheer volume and quality of chance creation, the XG, the big chances? Was it Inter's almost complete lack of attacking threat, their incredibly low XG? Or was it maybe that spatial control, the ability to constantly penetrate the final third? Which number, for you, tells the biggest part of the story? Something to think about.